Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be able to speak with you again today. Today, my presentation is from day 47 of the Tao of Joy Every Day, which is entitled The Unseen. And the subtitle I've chosen is kind of right out of what Derek says in the chapter at the end, or toward the end, is See When We Believe. And one of the things I'm going to do today at the end of the chapter is I'm going to read from a story from the Tao of Happiness, um, which is Derek's most recent book. It's a story that called The Happiness of the Fish, which Derek has told recently, but I think it fits in well with my subject today. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I'll read from the story directly from the book, and then I'll bring up why I chose to insert it here. But at first, as always, I'd like to do a review of day 46 of the Tao of Joy Every Day from last week. And that was, of course, opening and closing. And we talked about the use of the moderation principle in a meaningful way. When we do it correctly, our actions will be aligned with the great Tao. And this is true for all traditions. This idea of the moderation principle, you don't have to be a Tao cultivator to invoke moderation. You can do it with any religion, which is why I put this part in here about the Tao is the Tao, no matter what we call it or what others call it. People have different ways of relating to it. And that's why we don't, we name it, we call it the Tao, but we talk about it really being nameless, being unseen, and yet we know it's there, basically as a matter of faith, but we also can feel it and we can see it, which is what today's talk will be about a little bit later. Okay, so the second point, we talked about thinking of the hand opening and closing, just as Derek described in the book. It knows when to avoid shows of generosity and when to open the hand to give in a sincere and meaningful way. Speaking of someone who's not enlightened and hopes to be one day, probably not this lifetime, what I can tell you is I can't always trust my motives because often motives are subconscious. So until I can cultivate at a much higher level, I have to be very careful of what my motives are and to try to be as sure as I can that my motives are correct before acting. And that's just a good practice to cultivate, to be aware of what's really going on inside of you, what your true motives are. And that for me, I don't know about anyone else, but for me, it certainly is a work in progress. That's something I'm working on. Also, we talked about avoiding being wasteful. When the hand is open all the time, you're giving all the time, and that's when you really want to think about your motives, because incorrect motives will lead to wastefulness, and we don't want to squander what the Tao provides. To be trusted with something as powerful as the Tao, one should not give unless they've mastered the karmic mechanism, and that means that their actions have to be without contrivance. In other words, your motives have to be pure. And then the last point we made was it's not easy, and in some ways we have to cultivate awareness of the Tao first so that we can understand its movements. It does take practice, but if our hearts are sincere and we follow the Tao teachings of moderation, we will take uncontrived actions at the right time and in the right way. And of course, as Derek pointed out so well, we should always let love be our guide when it comes to giving and receiving. So that was opening and closing from day 46, and now on to day 47, which is the unseen. So Derek opens up the chapter by talking about a phrase from the West, I'll believe it when I see it. And Derek points out in the beginning that skepticism can be useful in Western civilization. It can be useful in any civilization, to be honest. It highlights the idea that the visible is what can be trusted as true. And, there's a certain truth to that. It's good to guard yourself against being the victim of a con or other things like that. Or in science, it's very helpful to see things directly, to have proof, evidence, and so forth. But that's really, when you're talking about the Tao, it's completely unseen, or really in any spiritual tradition in a way, the spiritual aspect of it is unseen. So I kind of thought of, because I come from a Christian background growing up, I thought of the Christian story of doubting Thomas. Now, he believed because he saw and then felt Christ's wounds. But Jesus told him, blessed are those who cannot see but believe. And to me, this really is a good Christian sentiment for what we're talking about today. And hopefully I can unpack that a little better. So with the Tao, we cannot see it, but we can often feel it if we take the time to be calm and to listen. And that feeling has to be trusted as a matter of faith, because we can't see it, not physically anyways, not while we're locked inside a body, inside space and time. So, and so it is for Christianity as well. And though I didn't put this specifically, it's true for any spiritual tradition. Regardless of how people relate to what we call the Tao, it is a matter of faith, and it is a matter of seeing the unseen in a way. And I know that I hope that doesn't sound like a strange kind of double thought, but hopefully you'll understand what I mean when I say that. So there is a spiritual void in the West, and in other places too, frankly, because people profess belief but don't really feel it. And I think we see that a lot, unfortunately. I think it's something like 85% of the country believes in some kind of higher power, or so they state, but they don't really take time to, I think most people don't take time to cultivate the spirituality. It does take time and setting aside time to do things like, whether it's praying if you're a Christian, or praying if you're a member of another religion that believes in a personal God, or if you're involved in something secular like I am, where it may take something like setting aside time to contemplate and to meditate and to do those things that help connect us to the spiritual realm. But it's only through doing those things that we begin to feel it, and then we can start sort of realizing that it is everywhere, and it does make up everything, even though it can't be seen. Only its manifestations are visible to us. But the Tao is everywhere and everything. And that's an important thing to know. And of course, it's good for us to remember that there is a truth in the reverse expression, which is the subtitle, which Derek pointed out in the chapter, is you'll see it when you believe it. Often this is true until you have the sort of lattice up of actually believing in the Tao as a matter of faith, do you start to see it move. I think this has been true for me, because it's not easy to be a Tao cultivator in many ways. I mean, if you think about it, someone could argue that it's not very comforting. There's no personal connection to it, you might say, that the Tao doesn't care about you. It just is there for you. It shines on everyone evenly, fairly. And so a lot of people can't relate to that. But obviously we're in this meeting because we do understand it at that sort of deeper level. And, that is a good thing. So I'm going to move on to the summary now and start to sum this up a bit. So my first point, although skepticism is useful for evaluating reality in both physical and non-physical ways, it's not very useful when it comes to connecting with the spiritual realm, which has to be revealed by faith, really. If you've ever heard that phrase, we walk by faith, not by sight. And that sort of fits this point rather well. So the Tao created everything as everything arose from it, but we can't see it. Of course, we know it's there because its manifestations are there, but the thing that created it is a matter of faith. So we have to try to feel it, and we can do that by being calm and looking for it and believing in it. And it takes time to connect it to it, as well as discipline. And calmness, of course, is the first step to prepare for feeling it. Then, of course, awareness of it will naturally rise. Then hopefully we can connect to it, but it will always be a leap of faith to some degree, while we live inside a body locked in space and time. When we return to the spiritual realm, my guess is it'll be a more of a real knowing in a way, real in the scientific sense, maybe is the way to put that. But for us in this realm, it is a matter of faith to see and to trust in those things and to take that leap. So that leap of faith is worth taking. There is nothing wrong with being skeptical. However, we must acknowledge that skepticism has its limits. And at some points, we have to cultivate our intuitions. And one thing I'm so grateful for personally is how Bill and Derek and Ed have helped me over the years, and also many of the people in this meeting with insights that they share have helped me. Because often we need a little help along the way, and we're here to support each other and provide help for each other. And I know because of the teachings, I was able to put my hard skepticism aside in order to save the things I love, including a relationship with my beautiful sibling. And I'm so grateful for that. And so as the last point here, I'm going to just bring up the slide and make sure it is in fact the last point. I wanted to read from the Tao of Happiness. So let me just bring that up really quick here on my phone. Just give me one moment while I bring that up. Okay, so this is The Happiness of the Fish, which is a story that Derek recently read, but I'm going to read it again just to refresh our memories. One day, Shang Tzu and Wei Tzu took a walk on the bridge arching over the Hao River. At its highest point, halfway across, they could look down to see fish swimming in the clear water. Shang Tzu sighed and said, "Look how happy the fish are. I envy their happiness." Wei Tzu sensed an opportunity to gain an upper hand over his old friend in their ongoing philosophical debate. So he smiled and asked, "You are not a fish. How do you know the fish are happy?" Shang Tzu recognized the attack, but was unfazed. He shot back, "You are not me. How do you know what is known or unknown to me?" Wei Tzu had already anticipated this response, so he countered smoothly, "That is correct. I am not you, and therefore I cannot know what is in your mind. By the same reasoning, you are not a fish, and therefore you cannot know what is in the mind of a fish." Wei Tzu was quite sure this would end their little debate, with himself as the victor, but Shang Tzu did not look ready to concede. Seeming just as relaxed as ever, he said, "Let us go back to your first question to me. You said, 'How do you know the fish are happy?' You did not ask me if I knew. You asked me how I knew. That means you already knew that I knew." Wei Tzu turned Shang Tzu's unexpected response over and over in his mind, but could not frame a rebuttal. Seeing this reaction, Shang Tzu laughed. The moment was priceless. He said, "I know, my friend, just by standing here above the Hao River." So let me, in all truthfulness, explain to you how I misunderstood the story. I used to take offense to the story. I remember the first time Derek ever talked about it in a meeting many years ago. He told the story, and I had to bite my tongue because I was like, "God, that sounds like nonsense to me." I mean, what if Wei Tzu had just phrased it correctly and said from the beginning, there's no way you could know that, and instead of saying, how do you know? Then what semantic trick could Shang Tzu have come back with? That's the way I used to think of it. And my problem, of course, there was, as I'm sure many of you are aware, is I'm missing the entire point. This story isn't about skepticism and materialistic truth. It's about intuition. The intuition that comes from seeing because we believe. And if you've misunderstood the story the way I have, or took offense to it maybe at first, it took me many years to sort through it. And it was only maybe a couple of years ago when I really started to understand. So I invite you to check out that story in Derek's new book, and hopefully you'll see what we all profess to believe. So as always, I'll sum things up now. Donating anonymously to a charitable organization is a great way to jumpstart the karmic mechanism. The water pump, a story from the Tao of daily life, beautifully illustrates the karmic laws of giving and receiving. And of course, my book recommendation, The Tao of Joy Every Day, a great book to use daily to help one study and learn the Tao teachings and put them into action. Okay, so there it was, day 47, the unseen, see when we believe. Thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. I hope I said something that was helpful, and I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday.
Alex, thank you so much for that. I very much identify with the point that you were making. Like you, I myself find that Tao stories are similar to the Tao Te Ching in a way, in that, I think it definitely speaks to you more as you progress and mature and evolve toward your higher self. So definitely, I personally extract more meaning and different ideas every time I revisit those stories. From Suzanne, great job. Love the insights. Definitely, that's true. And I want to take a moment to reiterate the point that Alex has made, that you cannot see the wind itself, but you can certainly see what it does to things, so you know it exists. And when you're outside, you can certainly feel the wind on your face, on your body, so you know it's there. You just can't see the wind itself. And in the same way, we cannot see or touch love and other emotions. However, we can definitely see the effects of the emotions on us. Perhaps a look, perhaps an expression on the face, perhaps words and actions that are inspired by love or other emotions. So it's exactly like that with the Tao. Can really see it, can feel it, can touch it, but the Tao is the way of the universe, the way of human beings, the way that we all are towards one another. So we can definitely see the effects of the Tao when you follow it, when you are congruent with its direction, you see certain positive effects. And when you go counter to it, you definitely see the consequences. So I think point very well taken. And BB definitely agrees with me. She says, beautiful. She says, the Tao has made me drop out of needing, period, and being more. Excellent observation.